All right. Hello. My name is Mark Summer, and this is episode 1 of the Energy Technologies podcast. And I had this idea because there are so many people who I know in the energy industry and the compression segment in particular, who they have great minds, and more importantly, they are people who get stuff done. So our first guest is going to be my friend Mary Savalle, and Mary and we became friends a few years ago via just some commonalities on LinkedIn, and it turned into a real friendship. And so I'm going to turn it over to Mary. So Mary is a wife, a mother, a STEM educator, and a natural gas engine compression subject matter expert. So thanks for going down this rabbit hole with me, Mary. I was going to say this could be a diamond in the rough, but I have a feeling, and it's not because of the guest and future guest, I don't think it'll ever be a diamond. I was thinking like maybe it's like a dusty piece of coal that we could polish up a bit. So
you know what, that fits us all pretty well. So.
Right, exactly. So yeah, so can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Well, I on my LinkedIn, it very clearly expresses that I'm an engine enthusiast, right? And I've studied engines for the 14 years that I've now been in the natural gas industry. And the truth is that I love it, right? And I think that that's why I connect with people, is because it's not just a job for me, which is very clear in this last year, right? It's something that I believe in. It's something that I believe we lack education in. And so, including myself. And so it's just become a focus of mine to really learn more about them and educate people along the way. So it's become a pretty good focal point in my life.
Yeah, it's one of those things that, unless you're in it, you wouldn't understand it, kind of thing. And when you get in it and take that deeper dive, like there's that meme that I love so much. I've seen where it shows the couple laying in bed and the woman looking at the guy, and it's from her. It's, I bet he's thinking of other women. And his thought bubble says, it has spark, it has fuel, but it won't start. Why? And I'm like, yeah, that's folks like us.
Exactly. And it really is hard to explain to people, right? It is, especially me. I didn't touch an engine until I was into my career, and so quickly fell in love with them that it was like a night and day situation, right? Like why all of a sudden this particular subject? And truthfully, I think it was just as much the people that I connected with as it was the equipment.
Yeah.
And so it creates just a community, right? It creates a group of knowledge, and it's really a cool connection to those people that you work with.
Yeah, I think the best way to put it is that we are a tribe.
For sure.
Yeah, and there's all different.
There's plenty of problems.
Yeah,
we just need to come together to solve them.
So you got to the world of engines via gas compression. So can you talk a little bit about how you got into gas compression and the energy industry?
Sure. I went to school for mechanical engineering. To be honest, I grew up on the east side of Detroit, and in my education system, they didn't really teach you about what engineers do. The only fundamental thing that they teach you is that if you're lucky enough to become an engineer, then you might make money, right? Like there were these two correlations of things. And I just happened to do extremely well in chemistry and physics and the sciences. And I had a teacher that said, hey, we talk about this engineering thing, but you should really consider it. And just a couple crazy turn of events in my life. I was going to go in the Navy. I had a contract signed, and I happened to go to orientation at the university I applied to. And within an hour, the dean was giving the orientation. And by the time we were done, I had a job working for him, a scholarship for my first year. And he was a commander in the Naval Reserves and got me out of my contract.
Wow, that's awesome.
And so he took me kind of under his wing, and I got an engineering degree, but he was very much aware that in Metro Detroit, if you get a mechanical engineering degree, you go automotive, right? Like that's the target that most people have. And from day one, I just was adamant that I didn't want to do that for some reason. I wasn't sure exactly why. I felt like it was the norm, it was the thing to do. And so he said, well, what about the energy? What about utilities? And I was like, I had never, I mean, you obviously know what utilities are, right? But
Yeah.
you have no idea what's behind the scenes.
Right.
And so he got me an interview, and it worked out at DTE 13 and a half years ago. And I stayed with them. I stayed with them for that time up until last year. So it was kind of I never knew they existed, to be honest. And I think that's what happens with a lot of people. And then the moment that you see the infrastructure and what's all entailed, it becomes fascinating.
Yeah, that's the truth. It really, in the education system, yeah, it's the exposure to what engineers actually do is very, very limited. But yeah, we somehow everyone ends up finding it. So with your, I'll call it advocacy, I guess, for internal combustion engines. So can you talk a little bit about that and where you see engines having their place in the world, not just today, but there's a lot of exciting developments moving forward too.
Sure. And I think that's why I took this last year. So I left DT after many years a year ago, and everybody knows the pandemic kind of changed things for everybody. And my husband got active duty orders. I was in the process of looking for another position, and my son's school got canceled. Right. And it was like, okay, we have to make this decision if I take a year off and care for him, or do we find somebody else to take care of him and I continue working? And at that time, it was the hardest decision of my life because I absolutely love what I do. I mean, I really do. And so I took the year off, but very quickly, me and my husband both realized that it wasn't going to fly if I couldn't do something, right? Like if I couldn't do something involved. And I got a really amazing opportunity to teach STEM classes for kindergarten through 12th grade, a couple days a week. I've had the opportunity to homeschool my son and my niece this year. But I've also been able to stay really heavily involved in the industry. And I think that's what's so unique about our industry is that once you kind of gain a knowledge or gain an expertise, you never really get to go away, right? Like people are going to want that knowledge and to understand, because each person's experience is unique. I have some pretty unique experience, right? And just because of the equipment that I've worked on. And I also love it enough to want to share everything about it. Sometimes that works, sometimes not.
Well, and really the value in that, kind of coming back to what we just mentioned about the general public school system in this country, not exposing, and I've said this to you multiple times. I said, Mary, one day there's going to be more than one kid who they're going to be talking to someone like this, and your name is going to come up. This 8-year-old or 9-year-old now, when they're 30 or 40 or 50 or 60, your name is going to come up of why they do what they do. I believe that. So
I'm going to keep talking about them forever too, because the truth is, I think sometimes we get so convoluted with words and processes. And sometimes if you just take a child and ask them that exact same question, they can deliver the most profound answer because they haven't been corrupted with all of that other stuff. And really, they've opened my eyes to not only how I teach my classes for adults now, right? But just into how much importance there is to having fun when you do what you do. Yeah. If you would have asked any of them before this year, what is an engineer and what would they do? I don't know that many of them could answer unless their parents are an engineer, right? But now they can tell you so much about them. And it's not like, hey, I mean, obviously I talk a lot of engines because that's what I know. But the truth is, it's because engines have so much engineering to them. It's not just a mechanical thing, right? Correct. And so you can find this little piece in each one of them that says, oh, hey, I like computers. Okay, maybe the computer part is, your path. Or, I have one student that's fascinated with diesel engines and heavy duty diesel engines, and he's 16. I just see so much potential and these kids because it kind of sparked a thought in their mind. And so
Right.
they absolutely reward me as much as I can provide to them. It's amazing.
And I think that's a great thing by you giving it to your students, what engineering is in that manner. But because I've had the same conversation with my nephew a couple of years ago, who was thinking about going into engineering. And I told him, I said, well, think about the things that you love. Okay, what do you like the best? Cars, construction and building things, computers and electronics. Pick one of those, whichever one you love, you can be an engineer for that thing. So there's not that many professions that you really can follow your passion, follow what you love, and make a living and enjoy it every day.
And that's what's great about, I mean, yes, I have a mechanical engineering background, but every single day I was doing something different. I got exposed to the chemical world. I got exposed to the computer and electronic world. In order to understand engines, you really have to understand all of those components together. And so becoming an engineer didn't make me a mechanical engineer. It made me able to learn all of these different facets with
Right.
a foundational knowledge, right? And going back to school, I'm back in my master's after 15 years, and I chose an engine designs master's. And I feel it's so important to just continually feed that knowledge, right? Because things change perpetually. And so I think just as engineers, we're really taught to adapt and learn. Like that is the main goal.
Absolutely.
In college, I feel, until you get to this level, and then you start getting really into the science.
Right. And I love it that you saying an engine as the kind of the perfect device to teach mechanical engineering, because it takes what else? Okay, for one, has explosions and high temperature, and then you have to get rid of that heat and take reciprocating motion and turn it into rotary motion and have materials that will work for all of these things. I mean, it really is like its own ecosphere. I don't know if we'd call it, if it was a biological system. And then, okay, then how do we make it? Then we got to attach some things with wires to it. And so,
always my hardest part, by the way.
So that's, it really is. It is, I think it is the ultimate training tool for engineering for sure. So, and along with the education, can you talk a little bit about your professional education with the GMRC, the work you're doing there now?
Yeah, and in fact, this is a great opportunity to say this, but the GMRC, the Gas Machinery Research Council, has picked up one of my introduction to engine courses to be offered. We're offering it on March 30th and 31st from 9:30 to 11 Central Time, both days. So it's just a 3-hour course split over 2 days. Attendees can get professional development hours for attending. You can go to the website, check the registration. But the reason I'm so excited about it is because you can find engine training at pretty much any company, right? Like each individual company will have a basic compressor or engine class or something similar to that. This class is more history and understanding the fundamentals of those engines before you take it further. Right? Where did we come from to get to where we're at today? So I go through the history of the horsepower, and it's such a cool story. Like not enough people tell that story about how literal horses, right, dictated how we base everything now today. And so I go through the history and all the different types of horsepower. There's so many. We say the word loosely, but there's multiple different calculations and variations. But the most important part of the class is understanding the emissions and the output of the engine, because that is my goal in my career, is that I think we villainize internal combustion engines. At least a sector of our world does.
Yeah.
And the truth is, because I genuinely believe it's not understood enough. It's the diesel car that spits out the cloud of smoke in the wintertime, and people think it's spitting out all of this CO2 and all this nastiness, and it's just water, right?
Right.
It's just water coming out in freezing cold temperatures. And so it's trying to make those things, those negative, connotations around all of this stuff, say, no, we're actually in the natural gas industry. We're doing exceptional things. The research is just continuing and continuing, because you're not going to ever get what we need out of another source. Let me take that back. If we do, the amount of time it will take to replace all of what we have is almost infinite, right? If you think about how we disperse gas, how we backfill peak loads on the electric system during the summertime, how we transport anything in the water at all. There's just all of these things that people don't realize. Even if we want to make this change, why are we making such an abrupt change, right? Why can't we say, let's make this, I'm going to use Dr. Senecal's term, but why not make this an eclectic future, right? And say, no, internal combustion engines absolutely have their place. They do. And we're making strides to make them better. But if we don't understand them, if we're not educated on them, then it's going to be very easy to go down that path of thinking that they're bad. Right?
I'm 100% in agreement on that. And from Dr. Senecal, his statement of, if we just stop, there's so much more we can do. And if we just stop development, that doesn't do anyone any good. So yeah, we're on the same page. And I think our challenge is, as an industry, is to, someone who can distill this into terms that the media will consume and the general public will understand, because there is so much good that's happening, and it is a bit frustrating that folks don't know all the good that is happening.
Yeah, and I really do question why that is, right? Like, where are they getting their information? Does it become confrontational, and then therefore it negates the purpose? Do they listen and it just goes completely out the other side? I've really tried to understand why there's just this hard stop on it, right? I mean, you'll never catch me say that there's not a place for alternate energy. Mm-hmm. I wholeheartedly believe that there is. I believe that it should be invested in. I believe that it should be considered a part of our future. However, so are engines, and so, but I feel like on the other side, often you get, nope, this is the future. We're going to knock it all out. And I just think that there's such a happy medium that can be found, right? Between all of it.
Yeah. I equate it to having maybe one pair of shoes in your closet versus dress shoes and work boots and a pair of running shoes, to say, well, let's just find something that's kind of in between all, get rid of all this, and now everyone gets one pair of shoes. So yeah, yeah, that's yeah.
And then when you're forced into just this one option, right, you no longer really have the control. And so I don't know, I struggle with it, because I will never argue with somebody that what they're saying isn't valid when it comes to that, right? There's absolutely a place for those dress shoes. There's absolutely a place for your tennis shoes. There is a place, and there's so much room for all of it. I think it's maybe fighting for research dollars, right? If we invest everything into this pocket, then we'll take off quicker. And then we stop thinking about this bucket. And it's just, I don't know, it's not, I found the perfect, I think that's what it boils down to, is that it's not everybody, right? I have been wanting to go back for my master's for years, and I just never found the right program. I didn't want just another general engineering degree. I absolutely wanted something that was pointed and focused, and to be around like-minded people that felt exactly the way I did, that were investing not only in ourselves, but into a whole line of industry that people think are going to go away. I mean, if you really think about that, right? There's 15 of us in the program that go through the program, and all 15 of us are investing how much money into a future that half the world is saying is not going to exist, right? Like, that's a lot of faith in believing that they're wrong. And so But what makes it amazing is that all of the professors, all of the mentors, I mean, it is a program that backs it up with fact. They're not just telling us to believe in it for the heck of it, right? It's no, this is a science that has been
Right.
proven and we can make improvements to it. And I think that's why I chose the program I did, is because I needed that positivity, right? Like I needed to know that what I cared about so much, for reasons I still don't even understand, but I care about it so much that I needed to be surrounded with like-minded people, which is why
Yeah.
I really do love the natural gas industry, because
I get
it
it.
is a ton of support.
Oh, absolutely. So, well, we're gonna still stay hard on the theme of engines. So tell me, what is your favorite engine?
It's the same one forever and ever and ever. It's the Cooper Bessemer Z330.
Okay.
The thing is just a beast, and I'm sure maybe someday if I come across one that's even bigger, I'll probably fall in love with that one too. But the Z has so many unique features to it. Not only is it an integral machine, which I think we discount what it took to design integral machines 50, 60, 70 years ago, right? I'm currently in a design class for engines where we're just looking at a V twin that's, this big. It's nothing. And you think when we have all the computer systems and the CFD modeling and, Excel, like we have all of these techniques and these computer systems 70 years ago when these engines were designed. I mean, it was sheer brain power, right? Like it was just, I've read so many books on the history of them, and I collected their memorabilia. I mean, I've collected their technical papers and everything, but this machine it's 10,000 horsepower. It has anywhere from 12 to 20 cylinders, depending on how it was made. And so I think actually the largest one is about 12 or 13,000 horsepower.
Okay.
But the compressor bodies share the crankshaft with the engine, right? And so all of that momentum and inertia, and you have 20-inch bores, 20 inches, right? Like people, I think that's what's so fascinating about it, is when people say, oh, an engine, all pistons this big. No,
Yeah.
right? No,
Maybe
it's
your lawnmower.
575 pounds and it's huge. And it has to be moved by this one shaft in this engine. And so it's just, I don't know, there's some other quirks to it. A lot of people deemed it to be kind of a problem engine. There was only 26 ever made. DTE happens to have 2 of them, and we got to do some really, really cool things with them over the years. And it was just probably one of my proudest moments of leaving DTE, is that over a decade, it changed from, oh, we got to replace these things. We got to, they're the most unreliable pieces of equipment. And over the years, we turned them into the most reliable engines in the fleet.
That's awesome.
Right. And so and that's just proof that there are things that can be done, even to equipment that was installed in the 40s, 50s, and 60s.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that iron, and that's kind of how I got my start, was around the integrals, late 90s, and see that those machines are almost infinitely rebuildable.
Oh, yeah.
Now the high-speed machines, there's a wear limit on things like the cylinder heads, how many times they can be remanufactured. 5 times is kind of the limit. So that is a 0 out all the way to a 0 hour and 1 top end overhaul. And that's so basically 15 years is the life of the head. And those integral machines, 15 years, that's like 1 year in high speed life.
As long as they are maintained properly. And truthfully, I mean, I teach another course on it, so I'm very much a fan of this. But as long as you keep the combustion stable, right? As long as you're not getting pre-ignition or your clearances are off, as long as you're really keeping those cylinders firing within, we target 5% of each other standard deviation. But those peak firing pressures, if you get one way up here and one that's dropped off the chart, yeah, those cylinder heads are probably not going to last forever.
Right. Yeah.
But if you know how to maintain your machine, that's what they were designed to do.
Right.
Is 100 years in, we got another 100, 2, 3 to go.
When they're tuned up, yeah, they're everything's perfect. And when they're not, that mechanical integrity, I mean, it is kind of like a self-destruct machine when with that amount of
And I've seen them
reciprocating
destruct.
mass. Yeah.
I
And I
mean,
should have known Cooper Bessemer was going to be your answer, because you see, I have one of your pieces of art, actually two of them. Your what the different parts of a spark plug do, and the Cooper Bessemer logo. So yeah, thank you for those.
I never did artwork before. You're kind of trained, same thing growing up. If you're an engineer, you think with the technical side, and then, you have your artistic, and then you think with a whole different side of the brain. And so you're kind of convinced that you're not able to do both, right? Like
Right.
it's one of those things. And, I've talked to you, I have a chronic Lyme disease. And so a few years ago, I ended up having to have a pretty big surgery. It was the biggest one that I had to date. And so I was lying in bed recovering, and we were right in the middle of a project at work. So my brain is there, right? Like I just want to be there and be a part of it. And I was going crazy, and I was just thinking about engines and thoughts and things that were going through my head, the Cooper Bessemer, and my fascination with that, and picked up a pencil and just started. And it really has led to some, I educate myself in each piece that I make, right? Because I search the history and the details and everything. And they are a key part of my training materials as well.
Yeah, and it's getting that left brain, right brain. I mean, no one is totally balanced, but we can all do some things.
Fiddle in the other side, right?
Exactly. So kind of along those lines. So what's a book that you're reading now, or what was the most influential book you've ever read?
Ooh, the most influential book I ever read. That's tough. So right now I'm reading about 6 books because of my classes and things.
Okay, yeah.
I'm just surrounded by engines all the time. But it's ironic. Hold on, I'll grab it.
Sure.
My auto diesel manual. So that's probably a better way to see it.
Yeah.
It's just a really neat book. It inspired a lot of my artwork, because it's just a question and answer about some of the most basic concepts of engines, right? Like, hey, sounds silly, but this is the difference between Celsius and Fahrenheit and Rankine and Kelvin, right? And just understanding what the absolutes are versus our system, and knowing how much that impacts what we calculate if we pick the wrong value, right? And or English to SI units. And excuse me for a second. That's always fun. But yeah, the book itself covers, it's more of a story, right? With examples. And it's not a textbook that's trying to say, this is how complicated something is. It really took me through some stuff that I thought was really complicated and made it simple to understand.
I will have to check that out. I've heard of it, and honestly, you're refreshing my memory. I have to check it out.
I have to tell you though, and this is not typical, but this version I think is from 1944. Okay. There are versions, like they kept revising it, and so it came out in the 60s and the 70s again. The older one is my favorite. Okay. Because of the graphics and things like that. So if you can find one, I feel like the older ones really just captured what I work on, right? And that is the equipment that was built a long time ago. So
okay.
But yeah, cool. I've read it multiple times.
Awesome. Yeah, there's a couple of books, same with me, that I will probably keep revisiting for the rest of my life, that I've been visiting for over 30 years, and I keep reading them. So who is someone that you would consider to be a mentor, but you've never actually met that person?
Wow. So I have 2, and ironically, both kind of having to do with my master's. So Dr. Senecal, he's an inspiration to a lot of people that feel the way that I do, right? He's somebody that has the knowledge, the education, the personality to back it up. And so he definitely inspires me, and we've never met. We've talked often, but we've never actually met. But he did something called Hug Your Engine. It was a virtual event last year where we were going to meet here in Detroit as part of the ASME event here.
Right.
But because of everything that happened, he decided to make it virtual. And so we did like a Zoom or a Teams meeting with a group of people. And he introduced me to Dr. Strzelik, Dr. Andrea Strzelik. And Andrea is the head of the MEES program. So at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, that's where I go to school, and it's the Masters of Engineering and Engine System Design program. And she is the head of the program. And she's phenomenal. And not only is she accomplished an insane amount, but she gives talks on it. She inspires other people to understand those facts, just like Dr. Senecal does. They're both graduates of the university. And so it's really helpful to me to have those two individuals, when I start to get frustrated, or if I see something that is like, oh, they're wrong, they don't have all the information,
Yeah.
then those two really help me just come back to it and say, okay, but that's why you're doing what you're doing, right? And that's important. But we've never actually met face to face, so I'm looking forward to the day that,
look, hopefully sooner than later.
at least before I graduate, for sure.
Yeah, and I think it's funny you talking about kind of last year that you and I, we had the first time we actually met live was the very end of February or very beginning of March, and you were telling me about what's going to be next, and but we didn't know what was next. We knew there was this coronavirus thing but we didn't know then
that it was going to flip everybody's world upside down.
Yeah, so pretty interesting. And so to close out, last question is, what is an energy industry stereotype that you would most like to see changed, or folks have flip that stereotype around to the general public?
I think we focus so much on the events that are bad, right? And truthfully, I don't want to diminish them, because in certain circumstances, they are detrimental to things.
Mm-hmm.
However, if people only grasped how small that percentage is in comparison to all of that's going on behind the scenes, right? I mean, none of us want to go in an engine room and have it have a crankcase explosion, right? That's not something that we look to do or to, hope for in our career. I've experienced 3 of them, and if nothing else, it's made me want to improve the safety. It didn't turn me away from them, right? It made me realize that, no, I want to study them more, and I want to make them better, because they're not just going away, right? Just like we talked about before. And so I think people just look at the natural gas industry in general as being eventually replaceable, right? And it's just not. And maybe that's why I do what I do, is because sometimes I can't explain it, but at my core, I believe that engines run this world. I've seen too many behind the scenes of city water plants and universities that have big diesel generators in the back, hospitals, and it's not just utilities. It's that this is really the fundamental core of what we do. And if we just turn our backs on it, that's crazy. And so I think, in my opinion, is that I just want to educate people that it's really not as bad as you think it is. Yeah. Emissions, if people really understood emissions and what our industry is doing to lower those emissions, the limits, some of these engines are knocking out practically nothing, right?
Right.
And yet they're still considered to be this heavy pollutant. I would really want to educate people on how incorrect that is. You know, are there some out there that are still pumping, that are grandfathered in and maybe don't have the best emissions? Absolutely. But those are going to be upgraded, right? They're going to have to change. But there's so many, the majority of them out there have been altered in a way that they're just not doing what people are thinking that they're
That's
doing.
right.
Right. And so that's the point I want to get across in my classes, in the workshop that I chair. You know, I hope that everybody sees and is educated on the fact that, you know, this NOx CO stuff, you know, yeah, it's there. It's a natural byproduct of our VOCs, they're a natural byproduct. But if you do the right things and you keep your combustion stable and you add just a little bit more flame in there to ignite it, I mean, you can virtually output almost nothing.
That's
And
right.
and so that's what I want to teach people about. That's what I want them to understand, that it's just false information. You're not getting the whole story.
Right.
Right. And so, yeah, I think that's really my goal.
That's awesome. Well, Mary, thanks so much. So guest number one of
I think it's awesome what you're doing. I
this has been a
really
lot of
do.
fun. So anyway, well, thank you. And if people want to follow you, can you tell us where to follow you?
Well, I'm on my LinkedIn, right?
Right.
So my name is Mary Savalle, and currently it just says engine enthusiast, right? And so
Yeah.
that's really, I educate for the GMRC, and I'm getting educated myself. And the truth is that I'm probably looking to get back out there in this upcoming summer, and with my husband's orders end, you know, and start looking again. And I really believe that that right fit is going to come with similar mentalities, right? Of knowing
Absolutely.
that this is our future, and really trying to piece those improvements together.
Well, and I'd finish off with, and hats off to your husband and thanking him for his service, and thank you, no pun intended, for holding down the fort at home while your husband serves the country.
Well, he still gets to come home. We're so fortunate that he still gets to come home every night, but
Okay.
he was a stay-at-home father for a couple of years, you know, so to all of a sudden get full-time, he didn't live with us for the first 5 months of the pandemic, but then after that, you know, he gets to come home every night. But it's still, we're at their beckoning call, you know.
Right.
And so anytime the phone rings and he has to go, it just was a really good time to take some time with my son and my family. And yeah, it's been really cool.
Well, absolutely. So yeah, again, it's been a lot of fun, and thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. Good luck with everything.